to the Quiet Warrior Show, where we help top leaders find their pathway to incredible success and a lifetime of happiness. Here is your host, Tom Dutta, the Quiet Warrior.
Well, welcome to the Quiet Warrior Show. My name is Tom Dutta, and I'm excited to have on the show today, Tom Dutta. Yes, here I am. This will be the first of a series of solo interviews that I do with myself. I'm having fun now with you, but I want to just let you know that when I get on the microphone on my shows are never scripted. They're not edited. You get what you get. So today I'm going to ramble and talk about a topic that was given to me by a friend. This show is for Margaret. Margaret, thank you for inspiring me to talk about this one word. Now, before I get into that one word, everybody, and I know you're probably saying, get on with it, Tom, this is a 20-minute show. I want to make a disclaimer in that through my life experiences, if you've read The Way of the Quiet Warrior, my book, you'll know that my life experiences have given me a lot of wisdom that maybe sometimes others don't have because of their own experiences are different. I don't want you to agree with anything I say. I don't want you to believe I'm right. In fact, all I want you to do is just hear what I know, and maybe, just maybe, I can shift your perspective or make a shift in your thinking, which could change your life in some way. As I started preparing for the show in my mind last night, I didn't script it or write any notes on it. A couple things happened that stopped me in my tracks. I want to start with this because this maybe will be a shift in thinking tied to the topic of this show. Before I tell you those quick stories, I've come up with what's called a through line for this show, and that is, it's okay to free up your future. So here it is. The word that Margaret wanted to know about was retirement. Retirement. When I say that, how do you feel? Do you feel excited? Do you feel happy? Do you feel some emotions? Or do you feel desperate? Or are you worrying? Or does it have a negative connotation? We'll come back to the feeling of words because words matter. This whole topic of retirement is one that's been talked about for centuries. But we're going to explain, why does retirement not exist? That's the first controversial statement you'll hear me make today is retirement doesn't exist. So get over it and stop worrying about it because it's okay to free up your future. More on that in just a minute. Yesterday, we put up our Christmas tree. We have this 7-foot fir Christmas tree. We have it flocked, which means we have artificial snow sprayed on it. It is environmentally safe, yes, for all of those listening who care about the planet. And we decorated the tree. We had some nice Christmas music on, my wife and I together. We're now empty nesters. My daughter, who comes home in December, has been away for a year at university. Usually this was a tradition we did with our children. It's different, but it's fun. So my favorite drink would be rum and eggnog, and the music and decorating. It's just a lot of excitement. And my wife and I remember every time we put an ornament on the tree, it doesn't matter if you have a big tree or a Charlie Brown tree, it's what's around the tree that matters. And each time we put an ornament on the tree, it brought back a memory of something or someone from the years past at this time of the year. It was just wonderful. I was watching last night, I was watching with Anna after the tree, a Christmas show. And we're in this festive mood. And I saw my Facebook feed buzz and I looked at it and my heart stopped. You see, I have a good friend and I've done some work with him over the last few months. And for privacy, I won't mention who it is. Some of you might figure out who it is if you know me and that friend. I don't let too many people get into my space and get close to me. Part of you know my background, where I come from, a life of trauma as a child, and I've unraveled and improved all that. But I keep some armor on. I don't let people into my space. I don't let people into my heart very often. But this man I did. He was this incredible soul, hardworking man, was very close. And then as we started to connect, something happened and it made this connection that grew and grew each time I saw him. In fact, each day going to this place where I was doing some work with him, I couldn't wait to say hi or to high five him, give him a encouragement, hear more about his family and his life. Just a beautiful soul. Well, yesterday they posted on Facebook that he'd been diagnosed with a very aggressive, rare form of cancer. Now I'm getting emotional just talking about it. I remember I paused the movie and I said to my wife, I want to go for a little walk to get something else to drink. And I did. But on the way, I live in a village is setting, and outside my door, we have all of the stores. And this was about 7 or 8 at night. I'm walking towards the liquor store to get, something to sip on. But my real reason for leaving, and I didn't tell Anna, was that I was so emotional. On the way to the store, I just started weeping. I had tears in my eyes, and I was looking up at God, and I said, God, why? Why this person? Why now in their life? And then I realized something that I was taught in terms of my faith. And this is not a religious show, but I want to just tell you that sometimes the power of faith does move us forward when we can't see the pathway. And I wrote down this passage and I posted it on Facebook in response to that post or that news that was shared with many of us as friends. And it goes something like this: Lord, help me trust you even enough through the unexpected twists and turns of life. Now, maybe, just maybe, that applies to the topic of retirement as well, because sometimes freeing up our future, it's okay. But sometimes it comes at a time where maybe we're not ready for it, or somebody frees up our future for us unexpectedly. Going back to my friend, I pray for him that he will make it through to the other side. He has a young family and lots of life left to live. The other story was my wife today told me she's going to a funeral, and she mentioned it to me briefly. Anna and I are different. I wear my emotions on my sleeve. Some would say that I'm always showing my worry, and my wife keeps it inside. That just works. We're opposites, but it just works. And the thing is, she said she's going to a funeral, and a child of a family had passed away. And, well, it was a tragic death. It was an accident that happened in the home, from what I understand, the home of the mother. And the mother was at that time battling 4th stage of cancer. Now, can you imagine putting it in perspective about talking about retirement when you hear stories like this? This was a member of a family, could be my younger brother, who had an accident in his mother's home and passed away far too early while the mother was battling her own demons with terrible disease of cancer. Now, why am I spending much time up front talking about these stories? And I have to compose myself, make sure that I don't break down talking about them, because I'm what they call a blue personality. I'm about deep relationships, and I'm very emotion based. Well, the reason for sharing these is I want you just to reflect on those two stories, not to minimize your life stories or tragedies you've been part of, and put it in perspective. Why are we talking about and worrying about retirement sometimes? Well, why do we do that when maybe, just maybe, retirement is freeing up our future to live life to its fullest? We should be focusing, don't you think, on every day living life to our fullest, doing things we've never done before. And maybe, just maybe, the word retirement was made up. So that's the narrative for today's show. Let's talk about retirement. First of all, the origin of the word retirement is a French word, believe it or not, from the mid-16th century. The origin of the word, I'll break it down for you. R-E, meaning back, tirer, T-I-R-E-R, meaning draw. So in other words, putting it all together, retire to a place of safety and seclusion. Boy, does that make you excited? The origin of the word retirement is to retire to a place of safety and seclusion. Does that mean that we've been living in a place of danger and, oh boy, we better go and hide away in a cave? But that's actually the origin of this word retirement. Kind of crazy. I mean, go figure, it was created by the French. I mean, those guys sure know how to party, wine, cheese, romance, maybe a short work day and short work week. I mean, some might say the French have been retired all their lives. I'm only kidding. Hopefully I didn't offend some of my French friends out there. But that's the origin of the word. Let me give you some facts, some quick facts. I did some research on this retirement thing. In 1889, in Germany, it was the first nation in the world to adopt an old age social insurance program designed by, they called him the Iron Chancellor. His name was Otto von Bismarck. When I saw his name, I went, yeah, right, the Iron Chancellor. I know that means other things, but the word Otto is a car made from iron, and Bismarck was a battleship. By the way, when I was a kid and things weren't too good in my home. My dad was a bit of a drunk, and I had a modeling room, and I used to go in there and build ships. And well, I built the Bismarck. I think it was a battleship. Maybe it was a different class of ship, but anyway, pretty amazing. But the whole idea here is Germany in 1889 put this in place for a reason. And at age 65, that's the age that was selected as the retirement age, time to retire. And it was really all done to appeal to the German working class and combat the power of the Socialist Party. Well, think about that. Retirement was put in place for somewhat of a political reason, and an arbitrary age was picked. Now, back then, I mean, we're talking in the 1800s, what do you think life expectancy was? I mean, not what it is today. I'm sure life expectancy was much shorter. Life expectancy back then, I mean, if you ever really look at that era closely, there was no refrigeration, there was no electricity. I watched a show once about the origins of Heinz ketchup. I'll tell you a little story about this on a tangent here. The idea here is that back in those days, there was no refrigeration. And so in the streets, the muddy streets, you would have the horse-drawn carriages, and people would be in the open market buying meats, and the meat would be green and rotten and covered in flies. I mean, this was basically what happened without the power of refrigeration, electricity. People would buy that and they would actually eat it. It became part of your life. It's what you did. And people were dying. They were getting very ill and sick. And so there comes the snake oil salesman down the street. This is where the potions and things came from. The origins of snake oil salesmen is that they would have bottles apparently that you couldn't see through because they didn't want you to know what was inside. And the potions, they would tell a story and have you believe that, hey, if you take this potion, it's going to cure that issue or that disease. It's going to protect you. Well, truth is, it was all BS. But the power of the mind, the placebo effect. Anyway, so one night the former owners, or not former, I guess, but they didn't know about what they were going to create in the future. They sat down around the dinner table, and I remember in this show that I was watching about this, they were all dressed in the attire for that era. They were eating dinner and laughing and drinking wine and having a good time. And they were looking at their plates, and you could see this dark green meat, and things were starting to go off, and it smelled apparently terrible. But people just knew that was just the way it was. And on the table, they had a bottle of some type of liquid, some type of sauce that came from China. And I don't remember the name exactly. I could find out, I'm sure, if I look back at that show. But for the sake of the story, they would pick up that sauce and put it all over their meat just to disguise the rotting flavor. How good is that? And then they would eat. Well, Mr. Heinz was at the end of the table, and he took a look around, and they started breaking out into laughter because really it was terrible what they were eating, and they all knew it, and they were trying to disguise it, but it was just terrible. And when he looked at that, he had a thought: what if I could create a sauce in North America that everybody loves and that they can put on their rotting meat and that they could actually enjoy it? And that's where he went into the kitchen and began experimenting with creating some form of tomato sauce, which eventually became Heinz ketchup. Long story, but pretty cool how you can take something from that era and turn it into a condiment that's used around the world today and loved by so many people. So why did I get on that tangent? I told you my brain works kind of funny. We're talking about retirement and how did we shift to Otto von Bismarck and rotting meat. I guess what I'm saying is that life expectancy rates back then were different than they are today. Arbitrarily picking a date to retire was what they thought was a good idea. Retirement today, as you know, people live a lot longer, so there's a lot more planning that people will do to make sure that their future is great. But I'm going to turn that again on its head. Retirement doesn't exist. For this show, for this episode, everybody, get in that state of mind that retirement doesn't exist. We're going to get into that more. Retirement became a government policy, and it was adopted by countries during the late 19th century, actually 19th and 20th century. Just think about that. Retirement became a government policy in the late 19th and 20th century. Anytime anything becomes a policy because of government, it's got to be not always a good thing. I'm just kidding, but that's how I feel. So here we are, and you have this origin of the word, and you have when it was implemented. Let's take a look at the age of retirement. Here's some fun facts. China, 56.25. I think these are 2018 data. Russia, 57.5. India, 60. Japan, 62.7. And that has been rising since 1998. You might know from history that Japan, because of Hiroshima and the atomic bomb, that they lost an entire generation. It's a small country. And my daughter-in-law, and her parents are in Tokyo. She's Japanese, and just a wonderful culture. But this is a country that lost a whole generation because of that event. So retirement ages are continuing to evolve there and be pushed out. What are the best pension systems? Why am I talking about pension? I don't know. I mean, retirement is, you're supposed to end your job or something, right? And then you have to make sure you're still getting paid. So let's start worrying about it. Hey, everybody, worry about your paycheck disappearing. Get all down about it. I am being facetious and I'm being silly, but I'm going somewhere with this whole talk. Retirement doesn't exist. It's okay to free up your future. The best pension systems in the world, here's the top 10 in order: Netherlands, Denmark, Finland, Australia, Sweden, Norway, Singapore, Chile, New Zealand. Oh, Canada. Yes, number 10. Canada made the top 10 pension systems. Pretty amazing. But think about that list. Think about how remarkable it is that some of the superpowers or the largest countries on the earth are not on there. I mean, one that automatically comes to mind, and I don't mean this to be a negative at all, but it just stands out. The United States is not on that list. And so you might want to just think about that. Why is a country that has so much wealth doesn't have a pension system in the top 10? I don't know. Probably have to talk to some of my wonderful American friends about that one. So you kind of get the picture that the fact is that retirement was a word that was an original 16th century, and then policies were put in place by government, and this system was just created. It never existed. Now, I want to have some fun with you and ask you to go back in your mind's eye to when you were, 10, 12 years old, as far back as you can when you were young and a kid. I want you to ask yourself a question. Did you know what retirement was? Did you even know the word? Or when did you first start learning about what the word retirement is? And who told you what it is? So we're going to get deeper into the science now behind the way our brains work. You've heard me talk about this before. I do a lot of teaching around the science of the subconscious mind. We have a conscious mind. That's our current reality. But we have a subconscious mind. So for example, as you're listening to me now, every word that I say and speak to you, your subconscious mind has a meaning and an emotion attached to that. All right, let me say that again. Your subconscious mind has a meaning and an emotion attached to the word. So words matter. That's what I was trying to say to you earlier. So when you come into the world, we have neurons in our brains, and they're apparently 2 million if you're a child. And my mother told me I had probably half of that because maybe I wasn't as smart. I love my mom, and I'm only kidding. But we have about 2 million neurons in our heads. And well, when you come into the world, the brain starts taking thoughts and emotions and wiring them together and putting them into each one of those files. I sometimes call your subconscious mind the hard drive. And so you have these files, and by the way, they never go away. They're always in you. They're created by usually somebody else. And well, it plays like a hard drive over and over again in your computer, running 24/7, even when you're sleeping. And here's the kicker. When you really study the science behind this, it controls most of what you do in your life. It controls what you do in your life. So for example, if you came into the world, into a home where you saw your parents through your eyes and ears fighting and yelling at each other, then maybe you have a definition of mom and dad and relationships that's not good. If you came into that world and you saw your parents hugging and kissing and loving each other, showing affection, then, mom and dad are good, or relationships and love are good. You see what I'm getting at? You can actually program your subconscious mind the definition of a word, even if it's not true, and your subconscious mind doesn't know the difference. You could train your subconscious mind to believe that an apple, a red apple, is actually the color orange. Does that sound ridiculous? Well, that's how it works. And that's why a lot of people who come from beginnings or come from lives of some type of trauma or difficulty throughout their lives, maybe childhood trauma, maybe bankruptcy of a business, maybe loss of a loved one happened. All those different events are wired into our subconscious thinking with meanings and emotions. So why am I telling you about the subconscious mind and words matter? Because it does. Retirement, somebody put the definition in your head and made you believe, and I believe, that at some point in our life, we have to retire. And then if you look at my lifeline and my career, well, I'll just tell you that during my career, I was an executive and right up to roles like CEO, and I was handed my future, or I like to say, I was given my future. It was freed up twice when I wasn't looking for it. One of the hardest things is when you're a top income earner in your family and somebody puts you in a room in your company and gives you an envelope, usually a manila envelope. And it should be a black envelope as far as I'm concerned. It's so dreary. But they say, here you go. We're really sorry. And they have trouble, but they let you go. Well, when your future is freed up unexpectedly, it can be painful, right? So sometimes this retirement word comes at us when we're least expected. Well, now everybody's talking about it. So if you take yourself from that young age as a child, you start moving forward, I want you to ask yourself, when in that your lifeline did you start learning about what retirement is, and who taught you? Well, I mean, I can tell you my own experiences. As I got older, from a kid, I started watching TV and seeing, Freedom 55 commercials from life insurance companies. I started seeing something odd where, grandma and grandpa weren't going to work. They were kind of at home, and thinking like, that's different. And then, of course, we started hearing about people close to us, maybe our parents, maybe about them talking about retirement. Every year, we have to go and put money in our RRSPs, registered retirement savings plans. The whole world around us basically is giving us this data about retirement. Now, if you watch commercials on TV about the R word, retirement, from life insurance companies, wealth management companies, they're going to paint pictures that are rosy of traveling and a husband and wife having happy time. That's the imagery that they want you to believe so that you can prepare for it. But the reality is, what imagery do you have attached to retirement? I can tell you from the stories I just shared with you that it's not always positive for me. I've seen people retire and gone through it myself where it's created pain because the paycheck ended unexpectedly. Or maybe over a lifetime, we didn't save enough money and prepare for that shift in our work or our career. And all of a sudden, life wasn't what it should be. I've seen stories and experienced it firsthand where people work hard all their lives for this R word, and then they retire, and the next year they have a heart attack or some health issue, some critical illness. It's crazy. Now, not to be even more negative, but I guess, we have to go there before we go above that line and be positive about this, that in the insurance industry, when I was a CEO, one of the jobs I had was running an insurance company. And I used to report to a board of directors in America, and I ran a Canadian company that was part of this global company. And my board were full of these actuarial people, really smart people, smarter than me with numbers. And I used to look at morbidity and mortality rates. These are tables of information that they use to assess risk and how much a premium should be that's collected by the insurance company and how do we pay out. And I almost choked when I first started seeing that data, that if you, in this one case, and this goes back, 15 years, if you work in a high stress job past the age of 55, that next 5 years, the morbidity and mortality rates go through the roof. Most people aren't built in their minds to be working under high stress positions or jobs, could be physical or mental, through the later years of their life. At least that's not what we prepare ourselves for, because the body starts aging. I know that word is not always a positive, but the body starts changing and our brains get to a point where we can be perhaps exhausted and we're on adrenaline, and all of a sudden something changes and we retire, and then we get sick, or we work too long and we get sick. So all of this is what is wrapped up for many people in the definition of the word retirement. It's a whole bunch of feelings and emotions and things, and it's not always positive. If you were born into favor, like many people I know, I grew up with many rich kids around me, always wanting to be not a rich kid, but to have money because I knew it would build schools and help me write my books and do things to change the world. That it was always fascinating to me to have money, but some of these people I knew when they got to that R word stage of their life, they wouldn't have to worry about, can I pay my bills, or can I take that trip to Mexico and have some fun? It was always just planned for them. But the reality is, if you're listening to me, that most of the world isn't like that. Throwing out another perspective for you, the majority of the world, lives on $2 a day, beans and rice, that type of lifestyle. If you really look at the population of the world, some 8 billion, I believe, the majority of people on the planet don't make a lot of money. They live in countries where they don't have privilege. And therefore, some might say that they don't even know what the word retirement is. It doesn't exist. You have to get up in the morning, go to work, earn your couple dollars or whatever it is to feed your family, and you do that as long as you live. Why am I telling you this? Because the rules around the R word, retirement, are really set by you and the people around you. The things that you see and hear, you created your own rules about retirement. So let me take you into a little bit more of the emotion behind retirement, and then we'll now take a journey to what should the state of retirement really look like. For the sake of today's podcast, I'm going to get you into that state. Well, empowering you to look ahead or think ahead. Retirement, it's a label. It's actually a word we know. It's a label. So here's what happens with the word retirement. Research has been done on this. When they ask people about the word retirement, people tend to worry a lot about this. It's one of the most stressful things that people prepare for is retirement. They tend to waste time preparing for what might come up. Now think about that for a minute. Here you are, you could be 25, 35, 45. At what stage do you start worrying about retirement? I don't know. For some earlier, because they've seen, retirement impact their family through others' situations. But my point is that we waste so much time thinking about what might come up in retirement. Why do we even do that? Those are limiting thoughts that can shorten our lives, that can make us unhappy. We should be joyous and excited. So let's try to change the definition. I want you to start working now in your mind to change the definition of retirement, making it okay to free up your future. Remember, that's the through line of our talk today. It's okay to free up your future. So let's change the stigma, I guess, around retirement, that it's okay to free up your future. It's okay to retire. But now let's change the definition. I'm going to give you an exercise at the end of this talk that I want you to take away, something I'm going to leave you a value that's going to help you create your own future. So stay tuned for that. But find a word. Maybe you're going into happiness. I know this sounds weird, and people are going to say, well, there's Tom again being odd. Yeah, okay, deal with it. Because I am. If you take what I said, and you don't have to agree, but for this podcast, accept that the word retirement doesn't exist. We're going to erase it off the planet. We're going to replace it with a word that creates emotions and feelings about what we really want. Well, happiness. It's a sense of well-being. How about joy? I'm going into enjoyment. Contentment. These are things that people tend to want. What about the word reinventment? There's actually a website out there, believe it or not, a website called reinventment.net. Now, I know. If we say I'm going into reinventment, it sounds kind of weird, but this company has branded that or trademarked it. And if you go to that website, it's all about reinventing, not retiring. How about the pursuit of happiness? For those movie buffs, Will Smith made a movie about that, but I'm going in to pursue my happiness. I'm going into enjoyment, a state or process of taking pleasure in something. Pretty cool. Now, how are you feeling when we're using these words versus retirement, right? Retire to a place of safety and seclusion. Oh boy. Or the opposite, enjoyment, exploring my pleasure. I'm freeing up my future to pursue my happiness. Think about how those emotions are right now. Very different. Now, when you have these emotions, what happens is your body's physiology, your subconscious mind goes out 24/7 and starts looking for more of this. So when you speak the word or think the thought retirement, your body and your subconscious mind, more than likely, like most people, is going to go out and look for worry. It's going to look for reasons to start dying, reasons life is going to slowly end, reasons your paycheck is going to be dropping and you're not going to have enough money, and doom and gloom. But when we replace it with positive words and imagery like happiness, like joy, right? Reinventment, the words have very different meanings And all of a sudden, we start growing. We will actually start searching for things to create a better life rather than start searching for a way to end life. Are you with me? You see, it's okay to free up your future. And when I started telling those stories about cancer, I did it for a reason to help you shift your emotion and feel what that might be, the emotion around a disease, and then put in perspective that we should be trying to think about positive things and living our life to the fullest, not trying to figure out what retirement maybe is, because all we're going to get is what society and people around us tell us. Your paycheck's going to drop. You're going to grow old. You're getting closer to the end of your life. Well, no, you're not. Did you know that Warren Buffett created most of his wealth after the age of 55? Did you know that the average startup, this is a company that people found, their founders, the average startup company is by a 45-year-old? Did you know that most of the wealthiest people in the world created their wealth after age 55? All those commercials about Freedom 55 is bullshit. All these companies, because they want to collect your money and they want to help you plan for retirement, but they don't talk about planning to reinvent yourself. They just talk about planning to retire. Eventually, you're going to go away. That's just backwards. Doesn't make any sense to me. We have to change the narrative, everybody. We have to change the narrative from retirement to freedom or reinventment, growth, happiness, enjoyment. Pick your poison, pick your word. What I want you to do at the end is write down a new word for retirement for yourself. You don't have to tell anybody, but start burying that in your subconscious mind and thinking about that. It's got to be a positive word and a positive thought with emotion that you want. It can be as wild and crazy as you want. It has to be deeply personal. Your vision, that single word. I want you to come up with that and then plant seeds and make that word grow, because after all, it's okay to free up your future. The exercise I'm going to give you at the end is about taking that word and creating a new vision and reality in your subconscious. So you go to bed at night and wake up in the morning excited about whatever that new word is. I want to talk about things like life expectancy. Many parents, we have parents from the Great Depression, some of us. I know my wife's late parents, wonderful people, grew up in the Depression in the hills of Italy. One was in the army, my former father-in-law, and he passed away sadly a few years ago. But he would herd sheep on the mountainside at age 12 in Italy, and he was in the war. In fact, he has a hat in his house we used to look at that has a bullet hole in it. And one day he said the Germans were coming as he was herding his sheep, and he laid down on the ground, covered himself up with leaves. Now picture that 12-year-old doing this, covered himself up with leaves, and so the Germans wouldn't see him. But just before that, his dog was barking, so he put a rope around his dog's neck and hung it from a tree and killed it. I mean, I'm not telling you a story to get you down. I'm telling you a story about the Depression to give you a visual image of, things some of our parents grew up in the war times or in Depression with a completely different life expectancy and experiences. Where there you every day you thought about survival, and you didn't take life for granted. Well, life expectancy, of course, was shorter back then. So people back then planning for retirement were planning, if they called it retirement, were planning to die earlier. What about reinventment? I'm going to throw out two words for you: crops and automobile. I started thinking about this in my mind because going back to my in-laws, when Anna and I got married, and it's coming up 24 years, my incredible, amazing wife, Anna, she was born just outside of Rome in a place called Polena, Italy, immigrated to Canada. I was born in England on the way here. My parents were from Fiji, as you might know, and I came here when I was a kid. When I married Anna, I remember going to her house on a regular basis. And of course, her dad was not quite retired. Maybe I got my facts right. When I met her parents, I think her dad was retired. So I would see his routine, where he had a routine that he was in his garden all the time, and he was digging and growing tomatoes and all sorts of vegetables. Your typical Italian garden, everything was fresh. It's absolutely incredible. And I would see, he taught me, which I didn't really know from my own childhood, how to actually turn a crop. You see, what happens is that when the vines from the tomatoes the tomatoes are all picked and the vines start decaying, he would cut the vines and just leave them laying on the ground on top of the soil. And he had this rich soil that he really didn't add a lot of fertilizer and garbage to. The vines over time, with the heat from the sun uh, over the weeks, would start to dry and turn into almost like straw. And then he would hand me a pitchfork and say, "Go turn that." He didn't speak a lot of great English, but he was an amazing taskmaster. And I would be in my rubber boots and my jeans, sweat pouring off my forehead in that hot sun. I'd be putting the pitchfork in, pushing down on it with my rubber boot, and then turning the soil over, picking it up and turning it over one chunk at a time, and burying those vines in the ground. Those vines would basically turn to dust. All the nutrients would come out in that soil. And then, of course, when you reimplanted the crop the next year, it grew and it was just this rich harvest again. And so you really think about crops. They don't just die, but they're reinvented. Crops are turned over and they reinvent themselves. The farmers reinvent their crops, right? Nothing's ever lost. The nutrients from the old just continues to be renewed. It's a really positive experience when you look at how farming is and how things will go through the ecosystem, feed us, and then they'll die and then they'll be reinvented again to grow. Well, isn't that a little bit about how we should think about freeing up our future? We're not actually dying. We're actually going through a process to reinvent ourselves in some way. Let's talk about the automobile. You look at automobiles. I mean, today, many automobiles are in accidents and they retire way too early, but many of those cars are sent to scrap yards, taken apart. The pieces are taken, refurbished and resold, and appear on roads everywhere in different cars. They didn't die. They're going to be reinvented and create some new model vehicle. So crops and automobiles, they don't just retire. They actually retire and then they're reinvented in some way. Now, whether that's a metaphor that makes sense to you or not, that wasn't my point. My point is how you can change your thinking, shift your thinking that retirement is not retirement. Retirement is reinventment, or whatever the word you're going to choose. You go into reinventment. You go into reinvent the next stage. Some people retire, by the way, at early ages because the jobs change that they're working, or they have a shift in thinking like I did, where I recreated my whole life to build my own company in a world that could pay me as much as an executive, but I would have lifestyle, work when I want and work from home, be around my family more. Actually, 10 years ago, went through a process to reinvent myself. And my book, The Way of the Quiet Warrior, has stories about that and what actually caused me to want to reinvent myself. So my point is that we should be thinking about now, not at the stage we call retirement. We should be thinking about reinventing. Let me give you some information from a survey that was done of 90-year-olds. A Canadian survey was done of 90-year-olds. I want you to remember a few key points in this because it's going to get you start thinking about the reinventment stage of your life. Doesn't matter how old you are. 3 Canadian regrets. They asked 90-year-olds, what are the 3 regrets that you have? And this was, remember, they were 90-year-olds. And the top 3, when everything came in, was contribution. They felt they didn't make a big enough contribution. Number 2, they felt they didn't reflect enough. And number 3, they felt they didn't take enough risk. Now think about that. Just think about that and ask yourself now, how are you making a contribution into life to others? I want to talk about contribution for a minute. One of my best mentors on my long list of mentors, I've had bosses and also people who are not in my life, but I've met who, inspire and help people, change, find them their true selves. And Tony Robbins, most people know he's a motivational speaker, but Tony wasn't the sharpest tack, in the box. Tony, his story, he grew up in California on a park bench, and he had a pretty tough life growing up with a bit of an addicted mother, and he had a hard time. And he was on a park bench, and he started, listening to tapes. Back then, there were these reel-to-reel little tapes or cassette tapes. And then he started reading. I think he read hundreds of books, and he pretty much got himself a university education by reading. And, if you want to be smart, don't go out and reinvent the world. Just go and read something somebody's done who's done a great job and copy it. So he started recording his own tapes and going to radio stations saying, "Would you play this? Would you play this?" And that began his career in personal development. And then he had a gift because of his size. He has this issue where his body had grown too fast and too large. But when he stands on stage, he's this giant of a man with his heart of gold. Anyway, I'm on a tangent here because of my experiences with Tony at some of his events have been so great. Why am I telling you this? Well, he said that he taught me that the human beings have a set of basic human needs. These are needs you have, and if you don't fulfill them, you tend to eventually die. He said something like, if you're, like a plant, you either grow or die. And so the reality is human beings either grow or die. And what happens to human beings that makes them start dying? Well, there's many reasons you can come up with, but one of the big ones is we label the R word. We're going to retire. We start thinking about that being the last stage of our life and preparing. We get our estate in order and maybe our plots in the ground where we're going to be buried, and all this checklist they give you for planning for your retirement. Well, people are in their minds planning to die. And so you want to plan to live. And Tony said that there's two human needs that you must have on the list. These two you must have. And one of them is spirituality. And the other one is a legacy or contribution. In other words, if you go beyond yourself and you do something for the world or for other people, you become full up. You become happy. Let me digress a bit more on that. You ever met somebody, and I know I met a lot of people who have a nice house, nice cars, they have a great lifestyle, lots of money, or at least they're comfortable, whatever it is. They don't have to have a lot, but they're comfortable. And yet you hear them talk and they're not happy. Well, they say that you can't be fulfilled and full up if you're living a life without going beyond yourself and doing something for others, being in service to others, making a contribution. Does this make sense? When you look at the work I'm doing, I've written my book, which is to inspire others to maybe reflect on the purpose of their life and find their own pathway to be happier. I'm doing my radio show to bring people to the show to share their stories, incredible stories, to empower other people to believe in themselves and that their stories are powerful. When we tell our stories, we can change the world. Our mess is our message sometimes. And so what are you doing to make a contribution? As you do the exercise I'm going to leave you with, what are you doing today and what are you going to plan to do to make a contribution? Now, here's the part that I've seen in many people who actually do, free up their future. They stop working and they get sick because some people define their life by their career. Let's face it, we spend most of our waking hours in our career. Well, if all of a sudden that ends, our bodies and our minds feel like it's a big loss. Sometimes it's really hard to find that next thing, and we end up experiencing mental health issues or getting stressed out. Well, it's because we never think about what is our legacy, what's the contribution going to be. Maybe you're going to start going and volunteering in soup kitchens or volunteering and walking the streets and helping people who are maybe homeless, or going and finding a way to contribute to building a school in another country, or maybe just going into a place like a retirement home. I know, we're going to probably go talk to them and tell them to change the name of that, but you start going into a place and maybe sit down and just talk to and read to people or spend time with them. Whatever it is, find some way to make a contribution. The other two words, we'll come back to that, is reflect and risk. Have you reflected much on your life, and have you taken enough risk? You see, in order to reinvent and grow, we have to be prepared to be uncomfortable. So you need to be prepared to take risk. Maybe, just maybe, you're going to create your vision and you're going to plan to leave your current job sooner than you would have. Maybe you're stuck on this unthinking treadmill like I was in my career, thinking that this is what I deserve. This is all there is. Where I'm placed is where I'm supposed to be. Well, no, you're not. Ask yourself the question. I always say in coaching, what are you prepared? What are you pretending not to know? If you go to work and you're on a treadmill and you're tired and you get up and you get into your job and, maybe you're complaining and things aren't the way you want it. Maybe you feel you're not being paid enough. You're being treated in a way that really isn't what you want. Maybe your boss is a bit arrogant or insensitive. Maybe people around you are negative. I mean, this is like the reality of the world we live in, right? That's why I call it sometimes a negative reality. and why we have to do a lot of work on creating our own joy and happiness, which, by the way, when you wake up in the morning, nobody around you can make you feel happy and joyous. It comes from within. Note to self, from somebody like me, I waited all my life for getting pay raises and being pat on the back at work and getting the top job title and maybe a nice new car and maybe my wife saying, I appreciate you for doing that. And when it didn't come, I felt like there was a hole in my soul. Well, excuse me, but you wake up in the morning inspired and happy, that comes from within you. So, if you're not feeling that every day, work on that part of yourself. But if you wake up in the morning, feel joyous and happy inside without anybody else giving you that, those are the people who make the time to do things for themselves first. Those are the people who find ways to be in service and create a legacy for others. In fact, they say that you can't be in service to other people until you feel full up and happy within yourself. Does this make sense? How can you go out and do something and help the world or help change the world, make other people happy or help other people grow? How can you do that if you're stuck yourself? That's a whole nother podcast. And many of you know from my story that it's not easy, but if you've got places that you're stuck in from past unresolved business, well, that's part of your future vision, maybe to take a course or do something to unravel that. I want to let you in on a personal secret that's starting in January. Well, it's not a secret anymore. I've registered for the first time for a course in CBT, which is cognitive behavioral therapy. Now, I know I start using the word therapy and you go, that guy's nuts. Well, deal with it. I'm not nuts. I'm actually smart. Cognitive behavioral therapy is actually a really cool course. This one's paid for by the medical community, and my psychologist, Dr. Remick, referred me to it. Now, again, you might say, psychologist, is Tom okay? I believe that everybody should have in their care team, not just doctors. Why do we go to our doctors and chiropractors? But our brain is an organ in our body, and we should get a checkup from the neck up and make sure that our brains are healthy. Do things like meditation, have a psychologist to go talk to and process difficult issues. There's times in your life, retirement is one, by the way, or whatever we're going to call it, when you free up your future, where sometimes you need somebody walking with you through that chapter, especially if it's a big change in your life. Cognitive behavioral therapy is actually just teaching you how to take your thoughts and process them differently, how to actually take your thoughts and avoid anxiety and things that come with the world of thoughts sometimes around us, which sometimes is not always positive, but how to process that differently. Apparently, I'm going to get a workbook, and I go for 90 minutes for 9 weeks, once a week, and I have an hour of self-work to do in between. I'm planning on taking that to improving the way I process my thoughts, but also using that to teach others. You see, now you're starting to get into my head here. At least I hope you are. You might find as you get into my head that there's a whole bunch of stuff in there, and it looks kind of scary. What comes out of me is a bunch of things, but in my head, I got lots of things that are always moving around on me. And now you start to see that if I think about how I'm going to make a contribution to the world by taking a course on CBT, I'm going to be able to learn from that. And maybe in my coaching work I do under my company, I have a training company most of you know about called Create, KREAT.ca. There's the commercial. But maybe I'm going to be able to use those tools that I learned and package some of it and teach it and help somebody feel better about their life, give somebody a competitive advantage, if you want to call it, in their business, because they're learning to process worry and thoughts of thoughts differently. When we think about thoughts, by the way, and the meaning of retirement, you can either feel retirement is awesome and exciting, or retirement is a downer and you're heading to the end of your life. Unlike what plants and animals can't have thoughts about their thoughts. I don't know if you knew that. But human beings, we can have a thought about our thoughts. So, oh my gosh, we start to ruminate sometimes, especially as we're heading to this R word, which is being put in us, which is not true. We start thinking about it sometimes a decade before it, because we're having thoughts about it. And then we're having more thoughts about those thoughts. And all of a sudden now we get into this state of worry. I'm going to have enough money, et cetera, et cetera. Don't think that way. My thinking now about the R word, and I'm going to call it reinventment, or my state of happiness. I'm going into my state of happiness. My thinking about it is that chapter of my life happens every few years. I'm always reinventing myself, reinventing my future in some way, doing something I've never done before. And when I do that, I'm learning and growing. I'm learning and growing. I believe personally, and I'm not going to tell you how old I am. You can figure that out from looking at some of my stuff online. My thinking is that it doesn't matter what age I am, whether I'm 40 or 50 or 60, that I believe that when I get to those higher ages, that I'm going to be able to do more, earn more money, create more future for myself, be happier. I'm looking at it as steps to reinvent myself. Like Warren Buffett, starting at 55, creating his future and his empire. I'm not creating an empire, but I don't see retirement in my future. I really don't. I see nothing but steps and things I'll be doing that I don't even know about that are going to help me make a bigger contribution, that are going to help me maybe grow, reflecting back on my life, taking some risk, and doing something I've never done before. Now, many of you know that some of the things I've been working on, such as my book, and I'm working on a children's book now. I'm also pleased to have announced recently that my book is being made into a feature film, a movie. It's like, wow, I'm still pinching myself. But all these things, and then my radio show and other things I'm thinking about, they all came from single thoughts. And when I thought about doing things, I never thought about the word retirement, because I got to be honest with you that we can't have a positive and a negative thought at the same time. When I'm thinking about growing and reinventing myself, if I think about retirement, which to me has a negative connotation, right? Remember, go to a place of seclusion. I can't create these things that have been happening in my life. If we change the meaning of retirement to something else, and that's going to be your homework, find that one word. Everything that happens going forward is going to be incredible. Everything you start doing, your subconscious mind starts driving you to do in your life, activities, even places you're going to work, what you're thinking about doing in the next 10 years, it's going to change. It's going to make you feel like you're back to being 12, 15 years old, where the whole future was ahead of you. And there was, nobody told you you're going to retire back then. So it wasn't in your mind. As I said, retirement is a state of mind. So we've got to change our state of mind. Margaret, if you're still listening to me, I've been rambling now for quite some time. Retirement is a state of mind. And therefore, we need to change it because it doesn't exist. It just doesn't exist. When we came into the world, it didn't exist. We just created that reality because the rules were put in place. So let's get down to a few more things here, and then I'm going to give you that exercise that I want you to take away, and I want you to do this. Now, here it is. The exercise is number one. I want you to find that one word that you're going to replace the word retirement with. And, you can have some fun with it and work it in a sense. I'm going to blank, okay? I'm going to, reinventment. I'm going into reinventment. I'm going into my pursuit of happiness. I've just freed up my future. Whatever it is, it doesn't have to be just one word. It can be a couple words, but you're going to replace retirement with this. And the rule is it has to have a positive feel to it. It has to have emotion. There has to be emotion attached to it. Okay, so things like joy and happiness, whatever it is, when you read it back, it has to make you feel some exciting feeling, some emotion. Got that? All right. Then what I want you to do is I want you to get a piece of paper and I want you to think of 5 years ahead. I want you to write what your life, pretend you're standing in your life 5 years ahead and what it's going to look like. Pretend you're already there. Now, I've done this. I teach it in my coaching practice where I get people to create their future state. But here's the thing. I don't want you putting in that anything about worry, about lack of money. In fact, your subconscious mind doesn't know the difference between fact or fiction. So when you're in that place, you can do something really radical. I'm standing on the edge of the water in Venice, and today is 2025. My wife is lying around the pool sipping a martini while I'm getting prepared to go to my cooking class in Venice to learn how to make pasta with one of the world's famous Italian chefs. From there, I'm hopping on my own private airplane, traveling the world to speak to children in India, where I'm from. Speak to those children and inspire them with my latest children's book. My children's book is being published now in the language of India with beautiful pictures from that country. Being able to light up and inspire the minds and the hearts of those children who but maybe can't see their way forward. On and on and on and on. You see what I'm getting at? A future state, when you're going into reinventment, you don't always know what it looks like. In fact, you can see the first step, but you can't see the staircase. But that's okay. If you're following me here, our subconscious minds, when we plant in it a vision and images and words and emotions that are positive, Albert Einstein, by the way, said that your future lies in your imagination. And the science of the brain is you can't imagine when you're having a negative thought. You can't have a positive and negative thought at the same time. But when you're creating your future, you don't need to know how to get there, because your subconscious mind will become alive and go out looking for what they call universal intelligence, or things around you that you might not have noticed before, to create that. Let me give you an example of what I'm talking about there. That image about being in Venice, getting ready to take my cooking class. And I'm a home chef, by the way. So, that's one of my passions. I escaped my childhood in cooking. Today, I just love it. It's got a different meaning. It's happiness. It's joy. Well, maybe if that's in my vision, in my future story, then if I meet somebody from Italy tomorrow in a lineup in a coffee shop, I might ask them if I could take their number and we can just sit down one day and talk about Italy, where they're from. You see what I'm saying? And they might lead me to something or someone there that could help me manifest my future. They say that your thoughts, you have thoughts twice. Everything is created first in your thought, and then it's created in the physical equivalent. I know those are just words, but whoever decided to put a man on the moon, they had a thought to do that, and then they went out and they had to create it into its physical equivalent. You have the power, no matter what your situation is today, how tough it might be at work or life issues, or maybe it is really good, whatever it is, you have the power to take a thought and create it into the physical equivalent. And what stops us is the limiting beliefs we have that we're not enough, we're not loved, we're not good enough. The other thing that stops us is if we're in a state of negative energy or negative thinking, we can't actually manifest a positive thought. So write down your 5 years and write it and put in it words of emotion, and take out any negative words. Read it over and over again until you get it. Now, you should make it about a page, maybe single spaced. And hey, if you can find me through my website, send me a copy and I'll be happy to take a look at it and give you some pointers. But create that. And in my book, The Way of the Quiet Warrior, in one of the chapters is actually like I called it, my definiteness of purpose, which is a term that comes from Napoleon Hill's book, Think and Grow Rich. Well, everybody has to have a definite purpose in life. That's just the way it is. There's just something that drives us from deep within with passion to get up in the morning and go and do what we love. So write that situation on a piece of paper, what 5 years from now looks like. And then what I want you to do is I want you to do a couple things. Write it on index cards, put it on one piece of paper, 8.5 by 11, and then take it and write it on an index card. But you might need to abbreviate the writing, and you can do it. You can condense it. Take that and read it into your iPhone. Most of us, or whatever phone you use, have a recording device. Read it into your phone. Create a collage. Some call it a vision board. I don't know. Maybe we can just call it your, freeing up your future, whatever that word is. But create a collage of pictures. I mean, I did something really fun. Once I had my one page written, I went and cut out pictures. And in my one page were things like a level of income I wanted, writing a book, cooking school, my family, love for my daughter, my wife, all these images of my future state, going into reinventing myself. And I went on the internet and downloaded pictures, cut them out, glued it onto a board, just a large construction paper. And then I took a photo of it. It's my screensaver on my computer. You can load it as a picture on the screen of your iPhone or whatever phone you're using. And there now you have the visual image of your written future state, your written story that I asked you to do. When you record it in your phone on demand, wherever you are, if you're sitting in your car, if you're going to bed at night, you can play it over and over again. And here's what we're doing with this work. And again, in my program that I coach, I teach people to create this future state, but then to bombard their subconscious mind with it. So learn to meditate, You could meditate for 10 minutes, which slows down your brain waves and gets you into a state of deeper thinking, in touch with your own thoughts, or turning off your thoughts so you don't talk to your thoughts. But it opens up your subconscious mind to receiving information. Well, when you play your recording of your future vision, you're now putting it in your subconscious mind. When you record that, use exciting words and emotions, but show your emotion. I'm excited. I'm vibrating as I stand on the edge of the dock, looking over the water in Venice. It's a beautiful day. The sun is shining. My body is full up with emotion. I can't wait to get into my first cooking class. I mean, it sounds a little weird, but what I'm saying is when you speak with words of emotion, it vibrates. The science behind the subconscious mind here, it vibrates those words and puts them into your subconscious brain, and actually triggers your brain to go out and do some work for you, to go look for a way to manifest that. This all sounds kind of odd. It's not. It actually works. It's really the way your subconscious works. So just stay with me on this exercise. One thing is for sure, if you choose to do this or not, you'll be absolutely right. You're either going to do it or you won't. The people I've done it with have changed their life. It gives you a new beacon of hope. Instead of thinking about the R word, you're thinking about freeing up your future, and you already have it visualized and written down and put in your phone as an audio being played back whenever you want. Imagine when you're having a down day, just turning that on. It could be maybe 7 or 8 minutes. You're listening to your future state. Guess what's happening? Your subconscious mind is getting bombarded. What you want to do is you want to consider a routine for 30 days. When you have all this done, reading your visions out loud 3 times in the morning or before you go to bed. Read it out loud. Listen to it on demand whenever you can. Put a headset in if you're on a break. Listen to it. Break the patterns of thinking. That's what you're doing. You're breaking the patterns of thinking. You're feeding your other brain, and it will believe what you tell it, and it'll go out searching for proof and ways to find the intelligence to manifest those things. Again, a thought is created in the physical equivalent, but you need to tell your subconscious mind what you want. And here's the rub with all of this. If you don't do work like this, everyone, your subconscious mind is basically going to learn what retirement looks like, the R word, from other people, from commercials, from things we hear on the radio. And that's what's going to put in there. And it's going to go into this state of basically preparing yourself to get old, your health to start maybe failing, and maybe for you to eventually perish. That is not the way you want to think about the future. And retirement is a word that was put in us. It's not real. So find your new word, whatever it is, or a couple words, and create this future view of what your life is in the next 5 years, as if you're standing there at a microphone doing a press release talking about your life. You're living it. Bombard your subconscious mind with it in the ways I mentioned to you, and go out and start building your future, freeing up your own future. Remarkably, you'll get to a point where you might be able to say one day, I don't need this job anymore. It's not serving me well. Or you might get really excited about the job that you're doing because it's low pressure, not the kind of stress that you really want. But now that you have your plan B and every day you're thinking about it and you're doing little things to create that reinventment of your future, now you're feeling even more excited and positive about where you're headed with your life. They say that there's a saying, I think it goes something like, if you don't know where you're going, all roads will take you there. And isn't that true when you think about it? Do you know where your future is? Have you created that dream world for yourself, that vision? When you live in that dream world, even if it's in your mind, you start feeling better. You start smiling. You start being happier. You start being more optimistic. All of a sudden, that arrogant boss who's annoying you sometimes, or that hard work you don't like, sort of tends to be put in perspective, and those feelings don't rule your life. Let's recap, everybody, as we wrap up. I think we've been just over an hour here. This has been quite a long talk, but maybe you've come back and you've listened to it in pieces. I'm hoping that you might find 1 or 2 nuggets in this. The through line was it's okay to free up your future. And for today, just for today, I challenge you to think about and realize that the word retirement doesn't exist. That retirement was just put in us, and it was rules that were created centuries ago that maybe don't apply today. And yes, maybe there's things about, money and all that we still need to think about, but why worry about the future and what's going to happen? Live one day at a time, create your future vision, rename that, bring some positive feeling to it, and watch the miracle happen. Watch what happens to the way you feel every day and the way you live your life. Everybody, let's leave it at that. You can find The Way of the Quiet Warrior, my book, on Amazon. You can learn more about visioning and the process of setting goals, and maybe changing your current situation and reinventing yourself by reading my book. If you choose to do that, I'd be grateful. So go out and live your true purpose with passion. Live the life that you deserve and desire. Share this episode with others. If you can find it on your favorite podcast channel, give it a rating. It just helps the show get more known out there and help many more people. So thanks for being with me, everybody. We're going to do another solo talk, and I promise you the next one will be probably less time spent. This is such a deep topic, but we're going to do a solo talk on another topic that was sent to me by a fellow named James. So look for that in the next few weeks, and have an awesome day.
Thank you for listening to The Quiet Warrior Show. Create is a motive-based leadership development firm. www.kreat.ca